Hello everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Pretty Lonesome. This week, you may observe that we are back in my bedroom and not in my car. I just wanted to be in here this week and it's kind of cozy as fuck, and I just deep cleaned it, which I actually filmed for a TikTok that I'm going to post later or tomorrow, because my life has been quite up and down lately. My room was not looking so good, and I've been traveling for a month, and I had like 3 full suitcases of filthy clothes. I have done the most laundry I've probably ever done in my life the last couple of days, and I needed to cleanse my room. I think I needed to... Usually if there's like a lot of cleaning to do, like more than I can handle, like more than a day's work of cleaning, like maybe I will, splash on a cleaner, because like that's a good way to spend your money, I think, is like have someone clean your space, because nothing feels quite as good as when someone else does it. Like you can clean it and it's like nice, but it's like when someone else does it, it's just like it feels so much cleaner sometimes. But I personally needed to clean this space, and I know that because I have been having quite the experience in my personal life lately, and I know that this podcast is late, this episode, so I appreciate you guys' patience there. What I was really going to talk about in this episode is defending yourself against misogyny and also rage baiting, okay? I have recently undertaken the task of rage baiting every man in my life, because I think that there is something so beautiful about the way that a man responds to being challenged, the underlying meanings and the underlying beliefs that sit beneath what he says when he hasn't thought critically about what his views are, where he stands, and how he's going to show up in the world as, a feminist. Because I think a lot of the questions that are common for women to kind of ask men, that I see a lot of like circulated around on fucking social media, is like, bitch, but now they know these questions are being asked and they know how to respond. For example, who do you think should pay on a first date, a man or a woman? Or who do you think should get dinner? And it's like, men know this question. They know how they might want you to respond based off what they already know about you. They know how to align with your beliefs, because it's not catching them off guard. I think it's much more interesting to do rage baity things just to see, oh, I touched your ego. Oh, your ego is big. Oh, your ego expands into these areas. And so one of the ways I've been doing that is saying thank you when I'm complimented, or saying I know. When you say thank you, it's kind of like, a lot of the time you're responding, oh, thank you, like almost as if you didn't really know that thing was true. Like, oh, you're beautiful. Oh, thank you, that's so sweet. And it's like, if you turn around and say, I know, it feels rude, because it goes against, the manners that we are taught throughout our lives of like just gracefully accepting a compliment. And I don't think that compliments are wrong. I don't think that they should not be gracefully accepted 99% of the time, but I think it's just an interesting way to probe a man to see how he reacts. I once tried it with this guy, because he always told me, oh, you're so pretty. Oh, you're so beautiful. And like a year into the relationship, I realized, I was like, interesting, like he has made me feel so pretty. He's like empowered me almost. And I feel like he would love if I responded like, I know. Because then it's like we're on the same team. Like, I know, I agree with you. What's wrong with that? And so then he told me, again, like, you're so beautiful. And I think I responded like, I know. And I remember he reacted so weirdly. It was like, or oh, all right, I ended up asking him about the response way down the line. And he kind of was just like, it's just not cute. Like, it's not like, it wasn't the response he wanted. And it just got me thinking a lot about like, so what is your intention then with the compliment? If you don't want me to ever know that I'm pretty, if you don't want me to feel pretty, it's just like it's like you're masquerading as someone that you're not, as something that you're not. And the compliment isn't real. You're more looking for a response. And you want me to feel pretty, and you want me to be very, sweet and polite, but you don't want me to be ever, empowered or confident. And it's like, that difference is so important, because it's very easy to believe that a man wants you to feel empowered and confident when he says things that are empowering and should make you feel confident. And then, God forbid, you become fucking confident and empowered. They hate that shit. So, and that, of course, none of this goes for all men. Oh my God, I would never disclaim that in my personal life, but since I'm on a podcast, I'm going to. But it's like, I really think that girls, like, this is just a lesson that I've learned in my personal life recently, that is, you need to know who you're around. You need to make people uncomfortable. You need to ask hard questions. You need to probe in ways people don't expect to be probed, so that they have not fucking meal prepped a response for you. Because I think recently, and over the last few years of my life, I've had my perception and my trust betrayed in ways that feel genuinely sinister, and sometimes have been. And it's like, as a young girl, I was just very, very naive in thinking that I could not land myself in certain situations. And it's kind of a feeling, I think, common among a lot of women is like, oh, I would never judge a woman for being, in this position because I've been in it, versus I don't understand how a woman can get so caught up with such bad guys and make the decision to not leave even when they, are in a blatantly abusive situation. And I too never understood before I had been in that position how you even get there, how you let everything fly to the point where now you're fully with this person who fucking hates you and putting up with it. And I never understood it until it was me, and now I just get it. I get it. I get how it happens. I get how you stay. I understand the whole thing, and I would never judge a woman for being in that position because now I understand it. And it's such a crazy thing because you want to believe that it'll never be you, don't you? Like, you want to believe you're never going to be the one to get in a car accident. You want to believe that you're never going to be in a plane crash. And you kind of want to believe a lot of the time that nothing tragic is going to happen to you in your life, specifically with things that are in your realm of choice. Who you choose to be friends with and who you choose to date is almost always, completely your choice. And so it's very difficult to just accept the fact that without proper preparation and proper thought, you could be someone who ends up in a position that isn't good. And I think that when I was younger, and I say this because a lot of my viewership is younger women and young girls, it's so easy to think it can't be you. And it's so easy to just give everyone that you're around this kind of preconception of not being terrible and not being scary and not having big views that it's threatening. And I think that the more that you probe into men and their egos and their beliefs and their tendencies and see how they respond to being belittled, and whether that's an aggressive response, whether it's an indignant response, whether it's a strong response, these are things you need to know, because the more that I probe, the more that I see, oh, this shit is fucking everywhere. It's everyone and it's all the time, and it's sometimes not as threatening as others. And I go about my life kind of projecting a lot, thinking that because I don't align with certain things and believe in certain things that maybe other people don't, and I think that they are outlandish, and I think that it's like, those kinds of people must be rare, or those kinds of people must scream that they're that kind of person when they're so terrible. And it's like, I'm learning more and more in my adulthood that it's not the case, and that probing for women who date men is completely necessary. And one of the ways I think that we should do that is through almost rage baiting. And what I mean by that is, like, try saying to a guy, how tall would you like to be? Or if you could choose to be taller, how would you do that? Or what's your dream height to be? And obviously that implies that the guy isn't very tall, and that's not always going to work because maybe the guy's fucking 6'5". But I think with most men who sit in the range of 5'11" to maybe 6 foot, or 5'10" to 6 foot, what's the average height? Average height for a guy is actually smaller. I think it's 5'8" to 5'11", I think is average in the US. But most guys are insecure about their height, right? And I think that it's really interesting, not to say that it's wrong to be short, but to see how a man reacts to you kind of acknowledging a flaw when the flaw pertains to his masculinity in his eyes, or maybe in the world's eyes. And I think the reason I've become so fucking aware of this lately is because of the side of the internet that's been exposed to me recently through, I've been seeing online all the stuff about 4chan, and I can't even repeat all the names of the platforms that I've been learning about recently. I think it's news to a lot of us because I never spent my time online in those spaces, and I obviously wrongly assumed that they were niche spaces and that you could see it on a person when they spent a lot of time in those spaces, like, a Reddit creep, and it's like, or a guy that's obviously a fucking loser gamer incel, and it's like, okay, there's certain people who wear that look on them, and it's like, that's not even a dog whistle, that's your whole shtick is that, and it's like, that's not niche. But I think I made the mistake of thinking that was where that stopped, and I didn't understand how widespread, how sinister, and how subtle, when you're not informed, these belief systems, these people are. And I think it's shaken me a lot. I think it's important to talk about, and I think that there are a lot of ways that women should start to test men in particularly ways that they're not going to expect, right? So, like, how tall would you like to be? or kind of calling him, a princess, or okay girl, okay princess, and kind of seeing their initial reaction to being called something feminine or being asked, if they would like to be taller. I think that it's important to talk about then the fact that all men, in fact, all people on earth, I believe, at least in the world I grew up in the country I grew up in, and in the country that I live in now, everybody is groomed into misogyny. We live in a patriarchal society, and I believe that misogyny is part of the air that we breathe. It is literally how the world works. And even if you had parents who actively kind of fought against that in the household, it doesn't exempt you from the fact that it was absolutely everywhere else, at work, at school, with your friends, and it's something that we are all exposed to. It is, like I said, it's in the air that we breathe. And so I think a lot of women are a lot more afraid almost to discuss that they are maybe not always the perfect feminist. For example, I saw a video recently, and it was this girl talking about how she's not a girl's girl. And I can't remember her exact words, but she was saying that it's something that she feels really bad for, and it's something that she's working on, but that she is really harsh towards other women in her head, and that she kind of has all these preconceptions and judgments and feelings towards them, and it stops her from being a girl's girl in the way that we hear about online. And I think that is so valuable to talk about. You don't get born a feminist. No one is born with a righteous set of morals or values. You learn everything and you make choices from there on out. However, no one is born to be a misogynist or a feminist. You earn the title of being a feminist by actively unlearning the misogyny that you are taught, and that goes for everyone. And obviously women, I believe, are significantly obviously more likely to have been active in this process because it affects them and they don't like it, and it's prevalent in their lives. But I think men, obviously, it's the opposite, and they're going to see it less, they're going to care about it much less, and it takes more action and more thinking for them to see these things and to amend these things in their own brains and their own behaviors than often they're willing to put out. And I think that things as simple as, how tall would you like to be? Or even if you guys are going out to a dinner, even if this is your current boyfriend, do you mind if I wear heels tonight? Kind of thing. And it implies that there's going to be less of a height difference. And I think that these things can expose a level of male fragility, okay, and play on a potential insecurity. And height with men and with masculinity obviously equals power. And I think there's an interesting word that I've learned recently, which is homosocial, which is that men are almost gay, but just socially. And what that means is they only seek the approval of other men socially. They don't seek the approval in the same way of other women. That might not mean that they don't seek sexual approval from women, but when they consider what they wear and when they consider, what they post maybe on the internet, what they wear, who they want to please in a room full of people, it's almost always going to be other men. And I think that if you can prod and expose these values and these belief systems and discover who you're truly dating, or who you're truly friends with, I think the thing about misogyny is it can be very quiet, but it's very powerful. And it doesn't have to be the case that they are, outright sexist, outright rude, outright hateful, even have strong opinions on things like abortion. It doesn't have to be that they, vote in a certain way. I think that this is such a deep, ingrained problem that it's nobody is exempt just because of the major political views that they hold or the major values that they align with. I think that it's more than possible to have a guy who absolutely believes that it's a woman's right to choose and absolutely, makes you feel safe in that regard. And it's easy to then assume that he is someone and has certain values. And it's not until you truly probe a little bit deeper and you can start to see, oh, there are some issues here. And I think that it is necessary to understand exactly where those issues are if you are going to spend any amount of time around a man. I cannot fucking stress that enough. I also think that asking them kind of questions that they traditionally ask women, and we might get annoyed, but we don't necessarily get enraged, I think is very valuable. For example, you seem very emotional today. Is everything okay? And if you're in a healthy relationship with someone, this question should never be a problem. This is more for maybe a guy you've just met, maybe a guy you're dating, to kind of see how they respond to not only being called emotional, but being called out on being emotional, as if it's a signifier that they may have been acting irrationally, and see how they respond to that. Asking them if they need a moment when they're getting maybe heated about something, or they are not responding to you in a very considerate way, I think is also very interesting. And I'm not saying that you should ask a man if he needs a moment, because I think that it's right to ask that just because maybe he needs a moment. I mean, obviously take this with a grain of salt. If you're in a long-term relationship, these are questions that you should probably be asking, especially if you're having heated discussions. Like, do you need a moment? Like, should we come away from this? That's not really what I'm talking about. I recently had an experience, for example, where I was talking with this guy, and I was talking about something mildly, I mean, everything is political, but I was mildly political. Like, it wasn't exactly a massive debate. It was more, we were talking about something that we had seen in the news. And I gave my 2 cents on the issue from more of a broad standpoint. And he went in with kind of niche pieces of information that were not at all relevant to the conversation we were having. And what it signaled to me in my brain was, oh, this piece of news didn't upset you. It upset me. And I don't think it upset you. And I think that rather than having a discussion about what it might mean, you're derailing this conversation, but you're also doing it in a way that is, you're subtly aligning with this thing that I'm not aligning with, but you're not saying it outright. And so what I ended up saying to him was that I thought that he was, not well informed on the problem. And I said, I think if you were well informed, maybe you would be saying X instead of Z, right? And because he was almost arguing with himself. He was making points that didn't matter. He was making points that, honestly, if you finished the thought, would have aligned right with what I was saying. And it was never meant to be an argument. It was not meant to be a discussion. We weren't getting into it. But I ended up saying, I don't think that this conversation is worth having, because I don't think that you've thought what you're saying through. It wasn't coming off put together. It wasn't coming off coherent. It was not making sense. And it was hinting at something that was quite disagreeable to me. And he ended up getting really annoyed with me, because he was like, I don't think that he liked that I had suggested that he was ill-informed or had a bad take or was less informed than me, I think was specifically the angle that he didn't like. And that was kind of enough for me to then take it a step further and start to probe him in many other ways throughout the remainder of our time together, and to kind of prod at his knowledge, not because I'm curious about exactly what he knows. I think that everyone's information intake can be completely different, and I don't think that it necessarily reflects that you have an underlying masculinity problem. I was more curious to see how he responded to me knowing more than him and me disagreeing with him, and not just disagreeing with him because we both had points but they didn't match up, but disagreeing with him on the grounds that you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm happy to have this discussion when you do know what you're talking about, but until then I'm not angry at you. There's just literally, I'm just bored. There's no point in having this. I would rather have a more interesting conversation with someone who is kind of caught up on this news cycle. And it didn't go down a fucking treat, I'll tell you that for sure. And it was kind of someone that I had never really thought critically about before. And then I started to, and then a lot of other things actually started to make sense. But I also think, let's circle back when you're less emotional is a fun one to throw out, because men do get very heated. A lot of men, I think, get very heated in conversations where it's completely unnecessary, and they'll kind of start talking a bit louder and a bit faster, and it's like they don't perceive what they're doing in any way to be aggressive, and it's not necessarily aggressive. They don't perceive it to be wrong. It's more passionate. And I think what's interesting is if a woman is to do the same things, in my personal experience, a lot of the time that same behavior is kind of met with almost like they try and diffuse something, and they try and say okay, let's calm, we're not arguing right now, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on it. I'm definitely not the best person to talk about this kind of stuff, but I think that there is an entitlement that bothers me around a lot of men that I know, and it's an entitlement to space, time, and energy. And it's like, your point is not so incredible that you need to be fucking speaking that loudly. You do not need to be raising your voice around me. You do not need to be getting so passionate about this. And it's like, there is just this entitlement to being right, to being more informed, to having their opinions validated, even when their opinions are not backed up by any critical thought or even statistics. It's like when I thought previously in my life about, men seeing women as equals or not, I think I thought more about like, do they think that we deserve equal things? And do they treat me the way that they would, with the same human decency that they might treat a guy? And I think it's very easy to kind of say yes with a lot of men. And it's like, yeah, they don't vote against women's interests, and they don't, outwardly discriminate or have any extremely brash views that I disagree with. And they're not outspoken about these things, and they're perfectly nice and polite. And then when you really fucking get to the bottom of it, it's like they don't spend time with women outside the context of sex and relationships. They don't employ women. They don't have women assistants. They don't have women on their team. They only network with other men. They only talk to men. I also think that a lot of men go on a lot of fucking tangents, and it's something that's bothered me for a long time. And hey, listen, I don't care about what you're saying most of the time. And I think that men have a vested interest often when they speak. They have a vested interest in being correct. And I hate speaking to someone who only wants to be correct. I prefer to speak to someone who is interested in the transfer of information and learning. My best friend and I, the way that we communicate is very how and why. I'll tell her something and she will ask me, wait, what? If she doesn't know about it or she doesn't agree with it, she'll go, what? And there's curiosity and there's like, hold on, I didn't know that. Or I disagree with that. And then the logical response for her and I is, wait, why do you think that? Wait, why did you say that? Or wait, what? If they didn't already know or had no thoughts on this thing, they'll go, hold on, what? Tell me more. And I think the main difference that I notice when I speak with men, by and large, is that their response is never what or why or how. It's always, here's my fucking opinion, and here's something that negates what you say. And if in the rare occasion that they already agree with what I'm saying, they kind of just will further my point in probably just reiterate everything I fucking said, but louder. And it's like this difference in communication style, this need to be right. It didn't bother me so much until I started paying more attention. And then I also started paying more attention in how men communicate with each other. And it's often the same in terms of like they're all just kind of repeating each other's words or adding on or trying to be right all the time. Anyway, let's move on. Most men were raised by a woman, okay? And most men, from my personal experience, and when I tell you my experience is extensive, I've been investigating this shit for a period of time, okay? Most men, when you call them out on maybe not being a feminist, or maybe having certain views that you don't like, or maybe like, have you thought about this more? Maybe you should think about this more. Maybe this is something I care about. Have you thought about this? And when you start to, if you want to go as far as, the thing is, I think it's more valuable sometimes to just observe. I don't think that it's wise to always pick a fight with a guy, especially if you've prodded subtly and he's exposed an ego or fragile masculinity or blatant misogyny and he didn't mean to, and it was kind of like, oh, we've just seen something, I don't always think that it's the best thing to call it out, because I think that, number one, you don't want to get yourself into any situations if you don't know the guy. I think that sometimes it's best just to kind of go, okay, and you know what you know and you leave, because I think that these things are hard to change. They take a lot of effort to change. And I'm not saying that we don't all have a role, on earth as to better each other and to be like, oh, did you know that what you're saying is wrong? And maybe they will care, maybe they will change. But I'm saying, if it's your fucking first date with a guy and you've asked him a bunch of questions and he's shown up to have a big ego and a lot of fragile masculinity, bitch, there's no point, unless you want to. I don't think that it's by any means your duty to sit there and point out to him the underlying beliefs of some of the bullshit that he is saying or doing. But I think that if you do get to that point, maybe you're dating someone, maybe there's some things that are bothering you and you think it's worth bringing up, worth having a discussion, worth understanding more about where they're coming from and what they believe in. And when I've got to those points with men, usually what they say is something about how they were raised by a woman. God forbid they were raised by a single woman, because these guys think that they're fucking exempt. They genuinely think that they are exempt from being misogynistic. Now, let me tell you something fucking crazy. I'm a woman and I was also raised by a single woman, okay? I struggle with internalized misogyny all the fucking time, but I'm aware of it, okay? And I make an active effort to change it. And I'm always learning about the ways that I'm being misogynistic without even fucking realizing it. And I see most of it through TikTok of when I see like subtle ways to fight misogyny in day-to-day life. But it's like the first kind of line of defense with a lot of men that I speak to about this stuff is they were raised by a woman and that their mum is really precious to them, and that specifically if they had a single mum, which is very, very common, like what, half of all marriages end in fucking divorce. So it's 1 in 2 men are raised at some point by a single mother. A big response is that's kind of their line of defense. And they, talk about how much they love their mom and that they were raised by her. And so they think that it couldn't be possible that they would be hating women. I think that's one of the most dangerous kind of positions to be in, because it's so fundamentally true that everyone is raised in a patriarchal society and everyone is taught misogyny. That is not just true for men, okay? And for a man to believe that his upbringing with a woman means that he can't be or isn't misogynistic only points to one thing, which is he has absolutely no fucking idea what he is talking about. And that means he has not sat and thought about his belief systems, which means he has never challenged them. And just because he's never sat and thought about them, and because he was raised by a single mother, does not mean that he is magically exempt from the culture in which he has been raised in. And I promise you that there is no human on earth who is just somehow exempt, okay? And there is obviously varying degrees, and that will change based on the content you consume and how you were raised, yes, in your household, but also what you dabble in online and the people that you are around and your work culture, your school culture, your everything. It's all dependent. But to say that anyone could possibly be exempt by being raised by a woman, to say that anyone could possibly be exempt from misogyny because they were raised by a woman or a single woman, when that woman herself would not be exempt from misogyny, is fucking ballistic. And it does not reassure me in any way. If anything, it tells me right there and then, you just don't know what you're talking about. And it's not to say that these people intend to be harmful, right? Like, there's a lot of things that it takes education to start to understand. And for women, like I said, a lot of the time we are much more aware of these things because it affects us. And it's not a sign of an evil person, I don't think, that just because they didn't see it or notice it, that they somehow actively wish to further it and be a proponent of it. It doesn't mean that just because they didn't realize and just because they haven't given it enough thought yet, it doesn't mean that they are a huge fucking fan of misogyny and think that there should be more of it. Any response except for a brief history on all of the ways in which that given man has noticed his own internalized misogyny and attempted to amend it, any response other than that is not enough for me personally. And I think that I was going to talk a bit about the whole who should pay for dinner thing, because I think one of the ways in which a lot of conversations around this kind of stuff gets derailed is, if we're so equal, why do I still have to pay for the fucking dinner? And all this kind of bullshit. And it's like, if you think that the first and best way to enact feminism and equality is to split the cost of a dinner, that is so insane to me. Like, you want to start with splitting the cost. Like, okay, would you like to walk me through some of the other stuff that you've done for this rampant equality of which you speak? That means that you and I are now splitting this fucking dinner. Would you walk me through how you got to the assumption that misogyny doesn't exist, the patriarchy is dead, and therefore we're going to split this dinner because I am a feminist and I vouch for equality of the sexes? I would like you to give me a brief overview of how you got here in your mind. Anyway, bottom line is misogyny is passive because it's taught to every single person, and to be anything else, to be not misogynistic actively, is a choice, and no one is born a feminist. You become by action, by thought. So I think the most important thing to take away that I realized and I knew, but I didn't understand the depth of soon enough in my life, and I wish that I had, which is, if it is not something that they are consciously aware of and actively thinking about and have opinions on and can hold a conversation about, that man is a misogynistic man. And it's not to say that he's born cruel or that he's born violent and aggressive and that he's born any different from you. He's not. He's born exactly the same as you. He grew up in the exact same world as you. And he has every ability to be where you are, which is noticing these patterns, which is changing these patterns, which is disliking these patterns. I think I made the mistake of thinking that it was, that I could see the harms, if that makes sense. Like if I was around a man who was at times a bit misogynistic, at times said things that I was like, oh, I would, you know, if I wanted to get into why he said that, that would be misogynistic. But it's like, you know, I don't want to be a pain in the ass and I'm not going to pull him up on every single thing. And it's like, those days are massively over for me. I see that there are things I don't know. There are things that I don't understand, that I don't see that are out there. There are spaces on the internet that people exist in that I don't know about, that I don't indulge in, and that can be so harmful and so quiet and so eerie and affect you in ways that you don't even know. And I have been around men who I met at maybe, you know, a point in their lives, and during my time with them, I have actively watched them be red-pilled. And it was an awful experience because I started to hear this person, this guy that I knew, say things like he would mention Andrew Tate, for example, and he wouldn't mention him in a disgusted or a mocking way, he would kind of just mention him. And if you are consuming that kind of content and you are not explicitly opposed to it, especially as a man, that is dangerous to me. That is severely dangerous, because the more that I understand about the internet, the more I understand the dangers, and the more I understand that it's not just a small thing. It's not just a content creator they're watching. It's not just the thing that happened on their algorithm that they noticed. It is so much worse than that. It is so much more sinister than that. And the change that can happen in these guys, like I speak from personal experience, it happens overnight. There is no neutrality. You cannot not do either. You are not exempt from this part of life just by not looking at it or not thinking about it or not doing anything outright misogynistic, quote unquote, right? It's not a choice. So you either care or you don't. And that's the bottom line. And I think the more that I ask my guy friends and the people that are around me about their thoughts and their feelings and their views, and the more that I'm hit with this, oh, you know, I love my mum and I was raised by a single mother, and oh, I have sisters, it's like, oh, so I have my answer and it's not the fucking one I wanted. Surprise, 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 surprise. And I think that there is this exhausting feeling of being a woman who's kind of had the smoke. Is it the smoke has gone, or the veil is lifted? I don't know what that saying is, of it, like you just start to kind of see these objective truths that exist everywhere that I would personally love to believe, and was much happier when I believed that they didn't, and was much happier giving people the benefit of the doubt and thinking it wasn't that deep, and thinking that, you know, oh, it's just not, you know, even if he does, you know, it's not that bad, and blah blah blah, and you know more than not he's okay, and more than not he's not harmful, and more than not blah blah blah, and kind of assuming this neutral position from everyone of like, you know, if they're not outwardly saying things, then they're not a certain way, and really realizing that no, everyone is, unless they are actively not, has been like an exhausting kind of introduction to like real adulthood, I think, which is like, no, the world is this bad and the world is this scary, and the only thing that's going to make it scarier is you not being aware of it, actually, because then that is how you end up in bad situations with bad people, and even potentially being a kind of shit person yourself, right? But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this was more of a talking about misogyny episode than it was rage baiting men episode, because it's just too intertwined. But I've been having a lot of fun rage baiting men, and I think that like also speaking to men, something I've been enjoying recently is speaking to men in very feminine ways when they're around their boys. I think one of the funnest things to do, and the most telling as well, is like, you've got to kind of probe these guys in different social contexts, right? So like if you are with a guy one-on-one, maybe you're dating him, for example, it's like an intimate setting, like he kind of trusts you, and he's maybe, guys will cuddle up to you and act like a fucking baby when no one's looking. And that's why I love those TikTok videos where it's like, caught him lacking, and it's like the guy like being the little spoon in bed, and then she sees he's recording and he like freaks the fuck out. Like, that's hilarious, okay? So obviously everyone feels safe in close intimate settings, duh. And so I think if you probe in certain ways and you say like, okay girl, or like, yeah, get it sis, like, and you do these very feminine praises and feminine sayings, and you call him girl, you call him diva, you call him queen, and he might react well. He might be like, yeah, like I can get down with that, like it's affectionate, it's fun, and you guys are safe with each other because you know each other. It's very different if you then can get in front of his friends and do the same exact shit, because the way that men crave validation and approval from their social partners is significantly louder than the way that they crave it from someone that is already romantically kind of theirs. If you get in front of his boys and you start using that more feminine language with him again of like, yes, queen, when he says something, I know he makes a point and you say, okay, queen, those silly little jokey things that we say, that his reaction there, that reaction to being spoken to in a more feminine way in front of men is also going to be telling, and it has a very high possibility of being very different to the reaction that he gives you in private. So I would say, like, genuinely, you got to try both. The one thing about these guys is they value the opinions of their peers, their male peers, socially. They value that above and beyond women's, which is true. And even when it looks like a guy does everything for the approval of a woman, right? Like guys who buy tables at clubs every weekend, who are always seen with a million girls, who it seems like their whole lives revolve around sex and sexy girls and women and how can they get the most women. And it's like, damn, you must, they love women. And it's like, they don't care what the women actually think of them. They care if they can get those women in bed. Can they have sex with her? Can they feign some kind of emotional intimacy with her because they need someone to talk to and they can't do it to their guys? They use like these women for all kinds of different things, but they do not give a shit. I cannot emphasize this to you enough. They do not care what you actually think of them. You fucking with their workflow or you fucking with their business plan is not going to mean shit compared to what it means coming from one of their boys, okay? Or, God forbid, a man that they admire, maybe in their same career path, or a man that they work with in general. Like, your opinion doesn't matter most of the time to these kinds of men. And it's very easy to feel like that's not the case because of how much these specific kind of guys value feminine presence and female energy and all of these other things, and how much time and fucking effort they put into visibly having the approval of women. But that doesn't go past the context of women as far as they are sexual beings. If you have no sexual value or romantic value or emotional value to men, a lot of the time, number one, you won't even be in the room, okay, with a lot of the guys that I'm speaking about. But number two, if you disapprove, if you say that your business is being run poorly, or I don't know, like whatever it might be, right? Doesn't mean shit, because that's not, they don't think that you have value in that sense. In that same way, it's going to hold a lot less weight to them if you think that they're slightly emasculated, because especially if you've already had sex with them, they've kind of already got you in that space. It's like, okay, well, you're fucking me. So, but I think it's like the only opinions that matter to a lot of men is the opinions of other men, whether that is aesthetically or in the context of work, business, money, whatever it might be. I think from my personal experience, they only care what their boys think of them socially, and they have very little regard for what the women in the room think, as long as the women will stay in the room and still fuck them. And it might only be a thing if it's as it pertains to like their dick size, their height, or their masculinity. But it kind of stops in that realm, because that is what a woman is to them. That is why they exist, and that's certainly why they're in the same room, and that might not go for the female CEO that they know, but it certainly goes for everybody else. And like, it is very selective, whereas I think men in general, again speaking from my own experience, but like, they thrive off of the social approval of other men. And if you try and call a man, okay, girl, okay, queen, okay, diva, like, or God forbid you say, you're getting a bit emotional in front of his guys, see what they do. Just try it and see, because, or tell them that you think that they are wrong. Tell them that you think that they should lower their voice. Tell them that they interrupted you. Tell them anything in front of their boys and see how that reaction changes from when you're alone, because I promise you, it might. Okay, I'm not going to say I promise you it will. I don't know who the guy is, but like, I think it's very likely that the reaction will be slightly different. And that's not to say that it's not going to be, there's a difference between embarrassing someone in front of their friends, and that would go for anyone. I would be embarrassed if someone loudly told me, you interrupted me in a room full of people because, shit, I probably didn't mean to. I'm sorry, I was passionate. And it's like, these things can also be just human error. We're all people. We all deserve a bit of grace. And I don't think we should hold anyone to standards that we don't hold ourselves to. But I think that there are certain times where it is appropriate to put your fucking foot down. And if you've been interrupted multiple times for no fucking reason, and they're speaking too loud, and if they're repeating your point after you, tell them. Tell them you need to calm down. Tell them you're interrupting me. Tell them that was my point. Tell them I just fucking said that. Tell them I don't need you to explain this to me. Tell them, okay, babe, okay, girl. And it's less so, by the way, about how important women's opinions are to them. And in my experience, I think it's more fruitful to focus on how important men's opinions are to them. Because it's kind of like, that's where the juice is. Because a lot of men will not outwardly believe or actively think that women don't hold any fucking value, okay? A lot of them will value your opinion in some degree, and I think if you just look for a lack of value in your opinion, in your words, in their social standing, in your mind, you're not really going to get the answers you want. Look more about the men that they are around. Look more about how they try and please them, and whether they thrive off of approval for them, and how their behavior changes when they're in front of them, how they respond to being emasculated. It's not emasculating, by the way, to do any of the things that I just said, but in their context, right? How they might respond to having their power threatened, how they might respond to being in proximity to femininity in front of their men, will tell you everything you need to know. And I cannot encourage people to do this more, because number one, it's fucking fun. Number two, it's gonna fast track what you know about these guys, because I am sick of seeing pretty girls hang around these fucking trash men, and it makes me fucking furious. And it's like, I just think we're at a point, just generally in the world, where it is that deep, it does matter, it isn't everything you do, nothing you do is meaningless, ever, and if you claim that it is, I know everything I need to know. It's not that you're right. It's not that you're right that it's meaningless. It's not that you're right that, you just didn't think about it. No. Get the fuck out my face immediately. The fuck out my face. Okay, that's it from me for now. Had backache from sitting up like this for ages. I miss my car. I probably should have filmed in there. I will speak to you guys later. And I'm getting a FaceTime video. All right. Mwah. That's my kiss for this week. Mwah. I love you guys so much. Thank you for watching. Sorry that this was an aggressive episode. I love you. I hope you're well. And I will see you same time next week. Promise. Well, not same time. I'll be on Friday. I promise I'm going to get back on schedule. This was an exception. I love you. Thank you for your patience. We're going to make out session because I was late. Okay, love you. Bye.